Hi, everyone, and welcome to Dementia Chats. I'm Lori LeBlanc. I am the founder of Alzheimer's Speaks, and my mother had dementia for 30 years, which is why I started Alzheimer's Speaks. Dementia Chats is a platform that I absolutely adore because it's about raising the voice of those living with dementia. And my mom taught me through her journey how important it was to hear that voice. The insights are so valuable, and it's just an honor to facilitate these conversations. So today we're going to be talking about relationships, physical relationships, social relationships through the internet, and how meeting somebody in person can really change the depth of a relationship. And we'll probably get into the DAA conference that just took place, where there were, I think it's 32 people with dementia who spoke. We'll probably speak about the upcoming cruise that we're taking in November, where we've got 4 people who will be talking, and that cruise is for people with dementia and their families. And we'll just talk in general about communications and advocacy and the power of relationships, I think, that are so often overlooked and understated. So I'm going to have everybody go around and introduce themselves. And Bob, I'm going to have you start, if you wouldn't mind.
Bob Savage. I got my diagnosis now about 2 years ago. I'm still doing quite well. I still have a few hints that things are coming along. So, and I'm very, very active in what I'm doing. We're having a wonderful time here in Connecticut.
Great, thank you. Brian?
I'm Brian LeBlanc. I'm an international dementia advocate. I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2014, 4th generation of having the disease. But for the most part, I'm living well with the disease.
Great, thank you. True?
My full legal name is Truthful Loving Kindness. I'm also pretty much 4th generation, and my current diagnosis is mild cognitive impairment with mild to moderate cerebrovascular disease and extensive Lewy body symptoms. I blog, Dementia Mentors, and speak, etc.
Thank you. Harry?
My name's Harry Urban. I was diagnosed over 13 years ago with dementia of the Alzheimer's type. And over the years, I developed a passion of helping people understand this disease and letting them know that there is life after their diagnosis.
Great, thank you. Michael?
My name is Michael Ellenbogen. I'm a dementia advocate and connector. I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at age 49 after struggling for 10 years. Today I spend my time advocating for the cause.
Thank you. And Mary?
I was diagnosed about 7 years ago now with Alzheimer's and vascular dementia now. I'm an advocate for Alzheimer's, and I started a memory cafe at my church, and I like helping people.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation. And True, I'm going to let you go ahead and start. Came off the DAA conference, and maybe if you can tell people what DAA stands for and what the conference was all about, and we'll go from there.
Okay, DAA is Dementia Action Alliance, and there's one in a number of different countries. Ours is USA. The conference was in Georgia, and what struck me most, aside from the, of course, wonderful addition of the physical dimension to my virtual friendships, was how it seemed like the people without dementia were so surprised by the value of what people with dementia had to say and wanting to invest in making sure that we could speak further in conferences, etc.
Great. Were those family members or business professionals, or a combination of both, that were kind of surprised?
From my perception, it was mostly business professionals that spend a lot of time going to, I mean, the ones I heard from most were business professionals that spend a lot of time going to conferences.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that doesn't surprise me. Brian, you're shaking your head yes, because you also were down at the DAA conference.
I would second that, what True said. It was mostly the professionals whose perceptions were changed, because a large amount of them said most of the conferences that we go to, we hear from neurologists, PhDs, all medical professionals. What we don't hear enough of is people that are living with a dementia-related illness. And every part of that conference was all about people living with the disease. I mean, even I'll show you the booklet, and it says, reimagine, I know it's backwards, but reimagine life with dementia. And it had 3 words: engage, empower, and enable. And that was held true throughout the entire conference, because we were engaged with everyone there. We were empowered by given opportunities to speak. And then we were, I'm having to look, enabled to do whatever it is that was needed to do. And the one thing that was missing from that entire conference was the stigma cloud. There was no stigma cloud hanging over our heads. And that in and of itself was so liberating, you know? And that's why we said there was so many people there that just got it. They understood it. And they embraced it. And in doing so, they embraced all of us, which was also a very liberating experience. So when we came away, we were just riding the crest of the wave, and the majority of us are still on that wave. It just impacted us so much in a positive manner.
Well, I think that comment is really interesting about the professionals. And the thing that I'll add there is then, you know, we wonder why communities and services, you know, that's who they've been listening to. And so are still so medical model oriented, because that's their funnel. For me, you know, since I started Alzheimer's Speaks, I mean, I've been trying to break that model, because I think it's just so critical that we haven't been listening to the voice and learning to live graciously with it. And it's exciting to see and hear people react that they're finally getting it. Doesn't have to be this horrible death sentence. It doesn't have to be all about MRIs and PET scans and medication and behaviors. You know, it's about living life. It's about people reacting to life, and a person with dementia is no different, and trying to keep putting them into a box of, you have to act this way. And because any of us who aren't diagnosed with dementia don't want to be put in a box and don't want to be told how to act either. You know, it really is no different. And yet people, and I think especially professionals that haven't had to live with it and haven't really had to adjust with it to the extent a family does, it's very, very different. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some companies out there that are doing really, really great work that are ahead of the curve, but there's very few of them. I want to talk a little bit, and I'm going to kind of focus on Brian and True in terms of DAA and meeting people who you would only socially known through the internet. And I'm going to go back to True. True, can you give us 1 or 2 examples of just how that affected you mentally, emotionally, physically, the whole thing, just being able to actually touch and feel and see somebody that you've only known and seen through this dimension?
It is like 2 different dimensions. The relationship in our virtual meetings, you know, like say Susan's session, I see maybe 3-4 times a week, you know, in her bathrobe, in the living room, outside. We go a lot of places together for 6 hours a week. We talk about everything from God to sex to what's happening with this symptom and that symptom. But being able to see her and touch her, and those strings of energy that develop with physical proximity are another dimension to the relationship. So along with those 6 hours a week, now there's that little string that stretches out, so that when I see her, when I see Brian, the relationship has changed a bit to where it is, instead of deep in this dimension, it is also got another dimension. And so it's extremely intense, exciting, and bonding. For me personally, that means it also costs energy, but it is so important and crucial to my well-being, and I think that's part of why it costs so much energy.
Can you explain what you mean by costing energy?
By which?
Well, you're talking about the physical relationship.
Both cost me energy. I'm a strong introvert. Extroverts gain energy from those interactions with people. It's a different way of energy processing. Extroverts gain the energy from those interactions. Introverts cost energy from the interactions. The interactions are still just as important, maybe not if more important, because with introverts, it's so intense. With extroverts, it's more spread out, so it's not quite as intense because they need more relationships with more people. Introverts require less people, but deeper. So it's a different way of processing. Okay. And with introverts, it costs energy instead of gaining energy. So I need to prepare ahead of time, have lots of alone time before the conference, during, and lots of alone time afterwards, or else the stress level goes way up. Last time I spoke at a conference and I got all that energy from meeting Chris Roberts and some of my other friends that had been just virtual friendships. I had another stroke right afterwards. I didn't even get out of Australia before I had another one and ended up in the hospital. Okay. So I personally, as a strong introvert, need to prepare for that energy cost. It's extremely important, but I've got to prepare for it.
Okay.
Budget my time and energy in order to make the best of it because it's so important to me.
Okay. Great. Brian, how about you? How would you describe meeting people that you had only known virtually through social media before?
It's amazing that I've been talking to people on Zoom and Skype and since my diagnosis, and you see them from the chest up. Mm-hmm. That's all you see of these people. When you see them in 3D or 4D, it's like, wow, they have legs. They wear shoes, and it's the whole dynamics of the relationship just changes because you have the visual here, but you don't have that physical part where you can embrace, which I'm a very hugging type person. I'm the anti. When True sees me coming, she runs the other way. No, I'm just kidding. But she talked about one thing that struck me when she was talking is that she talked about where she needs to have her alone time, and we had a quiet room that was set up, and we called it the Richard Taylor room, where people could go just to have peace and quiet. If True was not speaking or attending listening to another speaker, I knew where to find her almost every time. And she was down in the quiet room. She was down in the Richard Taylor room, just sitting. Now, she would be talking, but it was her space to be in. Where my space was, I wanted to be around everybody because I'm a talker. That's kind of what I do. But it changes the entire relationship, because now, you know, I look at Mary, who I met at the Alzheimer's conference last year. I look at True, that I just saw a couple of weeks ago. Those are the only two people that are in this meeting that I've seen in person, that I've met in person, that I've actually had an interaction with. So our relationship is different from others, and you kind of crave. You want that to change with everyone. Mm-hmm. You know, you want to meet every single person that you have a social interaction with in person, because how they appear in this little box that we're seeing everybody in is going to be different from how you interact with that person in person. It's just the dynamics of it all changes.
And that makes sense. You know, we had talked earlier, I think one of the biggest shifts that I see is that for many, many years, people just poo-pooed that you can't have a relationship on the internet. And I think all the dating sites have changed that. For one, sure. You know, it probably has gotten more attention than the dementia sites. But I think what people don't understand is the depths of the conversations that people have when they're part of the dementia community. All walls are down. You know, somebody might come up with a little bit of, come into in a group with a barrier in the beginning, and then they just see how honest and authentic, and every conversation is honored and really respected. And I mean, we're talking about the whole of life, and we're talking not just dementia symptoms. Granted, that pulls people together kind of like a memory cafe, but then you get to know the whole person, and do they have grandkids, and what's their family, you know, what's their family relationships like, and you know, what makes them laugh, you know, what stresses them out. I mean, you're just there for it all. And I think very few people, and I can't believe this is coming out of my mouth, but I really do feel strongly, I think very few people have those true authentic relationships in real life nowadays. They're texting, and they're doing short little forms, and they're not even doing, you know, I know my daughter and son-in-law, they rarely even answer their phone, you know, because they text. You know, so it's like not even hearing the voice and the inflection. And then you add with these video conferences, it really is almost like sitting across the room from somebody. I mean, you can get a sense of emotion. I know we've talked at times, and somebody will say something and we'll all burst out laughing, or, you know, we'll get teary-eyed, or, you know, whatever. And we can feel, you know, what's going on with somebody. You're able to read them and read those nonverbals. And I think that's something that is missing. I think people don't pay attention to that, and there's such power behind that. And then to be able to meet somebody who you've only known virtually. Like I was lucky enough to meet Harry a few years back when I went to Pennsylvania, and you know, when I met him, I was shocked how tall he was, but my heart just melted. I mean, instantly, my heart just melted that he and Hazel came out to see me, and I was just so honored and so touched. And I'll never ever forget meeting them in person, and I can't wait to see them again on the cruise. But it's just that bond that I think I just think we have lost a respect for relationships, period, not only in our country but in the world. And I think that has to shift, and I think dementia can actually help with that. Harry?
That's why when you have a convention, you end up speaking to professionals. You're educating professionals. Me personally, I like to have my conventions in the ghetto. I like to have the audience being people living this disease talking to them. That's why we have so many memory cafes we have. That's why Mary and I give talks at the Lancaster General Health, and we talk to newly diagnosed patients of dementia. And the highs you people were talking about, we live every day. We live on those highs. Mary's memory cafes are 2-3 hours long.
Wow.
And we're just talking. I mean, that's all we're doing is we're just talking. And it never fails that by the time I get home, I'm starting to get phone calls from the same people continuing the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I get so much out of it. That's what my passion is, talking to people living the disease. You know, now, again, I spend a lot of time talking at conferences, talking to the professionals, trying to convince them that they don't know as much as they think they know. But I would rather spend my time helping the people that are struggling with this disease.
Mm-hmm.
And letting them know that yeah, it's bad. You know, I'm not going to minimize it. I mean, it's horrible living this disease, but you know what? It is what it is, and it is what you make it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I want you to look at me and say, "Oh my God, Harry made it. How did he do that?" Now let's talk. That's my philosophy.
Well, you know, one of the things that I want to add on to that, because, and this is just me personally, I love that, you know, with the DAA conference, that it was a mixture of both, because I think that that's a really powerful moment. And, you know, since I started with Alzheimer's Speaks back in 2009, I've tried to pull audiences together, and it's funny because, like, in the speaking industry, they're like, pick your niche, pick your lane, be specific, you know, separate, you know, are you going to talk to the medical professionals? Are you going to talk to the families? Oh, could people with dementia participate? I mean, it was just like, hello, you know, everybody could be in the same room, because my personal belief is we are not going to shift our dementia care if we don't all hear one another, if we're not all listening to each other's voices, because we all impact it. So stop separating. Stop thinking one's better or different than another. We're all human beings. And, you know, if we go back to that base, that it's about living gracefully together, and how do we each tick? Because we each tick different. I don't care if we've got dementia or heart disease or cancer. It doesn't make any difference. We all are much more similar than different. And I think that that's one of the myths that need to be broken and really crashed apart, that if we have much more in common than we are different. And, you know, when we keep categorizing people, and I understand from a medical perspective, they need to categorize for research and things like that. But on a personal level, you know, you are a person first and a disease second. And I think that has to be put in position, all from physicians and researchers on down. And I have seen more brilliant conversations come by mixed groups of people with dementia, professionals of all different areas, and families. And when I go in and do, let's say, trainings for a community, they're like, oh no, we got to keep the staff separate, and we have to keep the public separate, because somebody might say something to offend somebody, or they might not be ready to hear it. And it's like, stop being afraid. They might have an answer for you to make it work. And you know, I think we have to get rid of that fear and just have these conversations and go in knowing that they will always be respectful. They have to be moderated or facilitated to hold to that core. But if we do that, we can move forward so much faster. True, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was speaking with one of the tech presenters. He had a product that he was introducing, and he said that the DAA conference was so unique in that we were all equally valued stakeholders. And that is such a change, and this is the part I'm adding, that's such a change from feeling like it is about us without us.
Yeah.
So it was like focused on us, but we weren't true participators valued in what we had in our input.
Mhm.
And this was a huge change, but we weren't the only ones valued. All the different stakeholders in the issues of dementia were valued.
Which is the way it should be. I went to a meeting last night and somebody said, oh, my city is redoing their city plan and we would like input from everyone. Da-da! You know, I mean, that to me, it shouldn't even be a discussion. It should be a given. But so many people feel like outsiders to so many groups because that's the way it's been set up, and that has to change. We have to start talking about community. We have lost our sense of true community. I've lived in my neighborhood for 25 years. I don't know the majority of them. The neighborhood I grew up in, I knew everybody in a 4-block area. It has changed significantly, and we need to get back to that. We need to know our neighbors. We need to trust our neighbors. We need to help our neighbors, and we need to ask for help too.
That's also how the internet has changed us, because you know, I'm like you. I knew everybody within, you know, a 10-block radius when I was growing up. We've been living across the street from this couple for 3 years now, and just the other day I learned their last name because you don't interact with them on a personal basis. Everybody, especially kids. I mean, kids don't play outside like they do now. They stay inside and they play their video games and so forth. But the internet is what brought us together. But the difference between seeing each other electronically and seeing each other in person, just that one physical interaction you have with that person, it changes your relationship. You know, you may not remember each and every relationship or each and every physical relationship that you had unless you have pictures to look back on. I was just reminded that Michael and I had met at AARP. There was an AARP conference for technology, and then we met at the Alzheimer's Association. I forgot about that because I don't have any pictures of Michael and I interacting in any way. So pictures make a difference too. So I can look back on the pictures, and the pictures will bring back that physicality that was experienced at the time. So yeah, I agree with you about not knowing and not interacting with people on a social basis, because that sadly that's lost, and I wish it wasn't, because I think it's much needed, especially in today's society. I wish I could meet everybody here, you know. And you know, because I think it does change something, and it changes it for the better.
Go ahead, Truth.
But I think it's also important to say that the physical meeting is not the get-all, end-all. For me personally, so often in the physical meetings, we've got a lot of people around us when we're meeting, whereas with the virtual meetings, I can meet Harry in his living room, and we've got this small group of 3 or 4. And so, again, I'm an introvert. I need those few but deep relationships. And usually in the social context, it's a lot of people, and I go home feeling I just as soon stayed home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one was different because there were so many people that I already had those deep relationships with. But I so often in a social context, I'm lost because there's too many people around me. I need just a few. It goes both ways. It's not just, social is not the get-all, end-all for all. Some people, maybe it is, but not for me.
Bob, did you have a comment?
We're experiencing the same thing here locally. We have support groups, but also we are doing common projects together. And we see each other in a whole different light. We see each other as people. And we're encouraging that a lot. And we're starting to see each other not only from our dementia, but who we are as individuals in life. And also, it's very touching, you know, when you see the different forms of resilience and how different people energize as a result of their disease. And I hate that word disease, but and I'm finding that I can understand conferences, and I can understand when we see each other and we go there. But I would just encourage encourage to the extent possible within the communities that you live, that we come together in a social way, we come together in a support way, and we come together in working together on different issues.
Great, Bob. Michael, I'm going to throw this to you because you do a lot with emailing people in business. And how have things changed for you when you're doing your advocacy work to go from email conversation to maybe a virtual conversation like this or a telephone conversation to meeting them in person? Does that change your relationship? Or does that add value?
Well, I think for me it's very different, Lori, because I probably started doing video conferencing 40 years ago. I've been doing it professionally because I used to manage IT, and we used to have video conferencing rooms that you would go into that had multiple cameras everywhere, and it was like kind of being in the same room with the person, even though we were remote. Because that's the business I was in. So I'm so used to been doing this for such a long time. And for me, I almost kind of feel that even though you and I never met, I think you and I probably feel that we have met because we talk so much and that we do this so regularly. So you don't always have to be with the person to really feel like you know the person. I mean, there's a lot of people I do a lot of video conferencing with that, to be honest with you, I swear I met them, but I really didn't. But it just feels like I have, just because we've had so many constant communications. And these are people that I've done business with, by video conference. So I think you could still get that feeling depending on how open you are with that individual and how frequently you have that conversation. But it does change things when you do get to actually meet the person. It does make a difference. But I would not say that is a must when you're dealing with people. I know it helps, but I have to tell you, I've had relationships where I've never met the person, and it feels like I have. So I think it depends on the individual that you're dealing with and the relationship that you've built up over time that really can be just as valuable, in my opinion, both ways.
Gary, how about you? Have you noticed a difference from dealing with people in kind of one realm and then actually meeting them? Or maybe it's vice versa. Maybe you've dealt with people in the memory cafe and pulled them into the social media world to help them with more support.
I like meeting people better than on the computer. I tend to shy away from social media. I don't know, I get nervous on it. So I like meeting and talking with people in person.
Okay. And that's understandable. I think there's a lot of people that feel that way, that it's intimidating. Do you do much interaction on the internet just through chat rooms at all, or? Or is that
No,
intimidating
not
to
too
you
much.
too?
I do mostly out.
Okay.
Doing lectures, like I've gone to like colleges and places talking.
You've been on the circuit quite a bit. And Harry, how about you? One of the first times where I had heard the kind of basis of the social media relationship versus people meeting in person was ages ago with Rick Phelps. There's a group of about 40 of you or so that got together in New York. And I just remember hearing over and over the value of that. And people thought they were lifelong friends. And they were just shocked that they really hadn't met before. And you experienced that, I believe, there too.
Absolutely. You know, like some of these people I met in person now, they live in a different country. But for some reason they're here in the States and we meet up. And oh my God, I mean it's so much strange. It's so strange when you meet somebody in person that you spoke to for years. You know, it's like, I think that's why Thanksgiving dinners are so important to people, because family comes together. You know, you talk to them all the time, but when you sit down at a table together and you're one-on-one, I mean, it's so special.
One of the things I wanted to talk about our upcoming cruise, which is going to be a little bit different because that's going to be for people with dementia and their families. And really, the professionals are going to be the minority by a great deal on this, which I think is just fascinating and will be just so much fun, because we've got, I think we're going to be talking about really being inclusive in terms of everybody sharing their stories. Michael and Harry and Mary are all going to be part of that, along with Lori Shearer. We would love to have been able to bring everybody, but just couldn't afford it this round. Hopefully we'll do another one. You guys will be sharing your insights, but you know, the goal is to really get the audience to share theirs as well, to open up and to experience. A lot of them haven't experienced a memory cafe, so we're going to do a memory cafe there. To me, one of the most powerful goals of that cruise is going to be to, you know, raise the voice and really position the people with dementia as true leaders and knowledge forces with this disease, but to also enable everyone to feel what I call their power of one. And, you know, we all have great information and insights to share, and to try to break those barriers down and empower people to feel just comfortable to have a conversation. I mean, to me, that's as simple as it gets. Just, we need to have simple conversations to move the world forward, not just with dementia, though that's, you know, that's our goal here. That's the beauty of what I'm seeing in our dementia care culture right now, is I'm finally seeing a shift. I think we still have a long ways to go. We're getting, you know, rave reviews for doing this cruise and doing something different. And it's not, you know, none of it is about, to me, none of it is about the accolades. It's just about taking the risk to do something different, to see if it works. You know, just see if it works. And if it doesn't, then, you know, don't beat yourself up. Just change it up and apply the lessons you learned in your failures to make it better. You know, that's the only way anyone has ever succeeded, is through failure. And so help people not be afraid of failure. I'd like to actually get that word to go away, because failure is just the ability to learn. And so I'm really excited about how relationships are starting to change, how they're becoming more inclusive and more respectful. I think we're in exciting times with all of this. And I encourage, you know, our audience to use the video conferencing more. I urge people to get involved more with social media. And that does not mean just pitching your business. That means adding value by having an authentic conversation. Many different ways that we can be advocating, if it's emails, if it's phone calls, if it's video conferencing, if it's belonging to social media groups, if it's getting out there and speaking at conferences, you know, memory cafes. It's endless. Do what feels good and comfortable for you, and it might not be good and comfortable for your neighbor, your family. That's okay. but everybody has their own niche and their own lane, and we have to be respectful of our own bodies and what feels good to us in terms of how we're going to engage in community. And I think we have to be respectful because, like as True said, some people are introverts, some people are extroverts, some people are a little of both, and it mixes up, and it depends on the time, a day, what's going to work for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think as we become more in tuned, we become more involved and we become better citizens. I think this was a really interesting conversation, and I hope the public takes this seriously and looks at not only people with dementia, but looks at themselves differently in terms of how are they going to engage, why are they going to engage, and how can they make a difference. Brian?
You had said something earlier about interacting with people living with a dementia-related illness and so forth, and people not knowing how to, finding it easier to talk to the professionals rather than the person living with, because they didn't know how to react with that person. And one of my missions in life, I probably won't conquer it totally, but I'm making a lot of noise about it, is stigma. Because people still have this perception when they hear the word Alzheimer's or they hear the word dementia. First of all, I like to explain to people, well, dementia isn't exactly a disease. Dementia is like, and I tell them the umbrella and all the stuff underneath the umbrella, the diseases. But then when they hear the word dementia, a lot of them think demented, and I hate that word because it's has a very negative connotation. So going into the conversation, they think, oh, I'm going to meet this person who's living with Alzheimer's. I know he won't be able to talk, and he won't be able to understand me because so I'll have to use, small words and this, that, and the other. So they go into this conversation with this preconceived notion, and then 2 or 3 minutes into the conversation, or sometimes not even that long, they have their eureka moment, and then they say, wow, this exactly, look at True's face. She's like, wow, this person can actually talk. They can have a useful and intelligent conversation with me. And that changes the whole perception. But what I'm finding is that we are changing those opinions of people, maybe 1 to 2 people at a time. If we are allowed to speak at these conferences, we do have the opportunity to change more than that. And that's what's so important. It's because, I'm not saying, hey, bring us all to a conference. I'm just saying, until you hear the voices of Bob and True and Michael and Harry and Mary and me, until you hear our voices, until you hear what we think, until you see us react to different things, you won't understand the full concept of what we mean about living well or living with this disease. Same thing as describing us as a patient. I'm a doctor's patient. That's all. I'm nobody else's patient. And I don't suffer. And I know some people have a different mindset. I saw Harry posted something about that the other day. I posted something about I don't like suffering, and he posted something, and I looked at it and I said, okay, I get that. I understand that. So you see, Harry, I do read your stuff. So, but me personally, I don't like to be considered somebody that's suffering, because I try each and every day to live with this thing. And sometimes it feels like a 100-pound weight around my neck. So I describe it as struggling with it, but not suffering. So it's changing the mindset, but the more that people like us get out and speak about our lives with whatever disease that we're living with, those moments are going to be what changes people's minds. And I hope that anybody watching this will say, hey, I saw this group of people and we need to get them here. We need to hear their voice because what they're saying really makes a lot of sense.
Very true. Anybody else have a comment that they'd like to make before we wrap up? Michael?
I have to agree with your statement, Lori. Things are definitely getting better. There is no doubt. I remember a couple years ago at NIH, they wouldn't even include a person with dementia. Last year, Brian and I had the opportunity to be a part of a group that was an offshoot of NIH. And I think that was kind of a pilot study to kind of see how we would be handling things with a person with dementia there. Well, I hope I'm not letting the cat out of the bag, but this year at their summit, they're going to be having people with dementia speaking, and I think they're going to be at the top of the program.
Cool.
So this is a real huge change. And I think this is great because I think until people who are living with disease are speaking up and encouraging them to include us, which is what I did many years ago, it's not going to change. And I think as the word gets out that places like DAA has done this and they had so many people there, and I think it's going to slowly see that you have to start changing the platforms. And that's what I think is starting to happen. So I think that with technology and with people with dementia coming out and with them seeing that we are still capable. In fact, I just read an article today indicating how people with dementia can still speak years later. I was like shocked. Like, what are you kidding me? It took you this long to write an article? I think this came out from the AP this day. And it's like, it's amazing how slow all these people are, but it's starting to come out. And I think things are changing.
I agree. And it's, you know, we'd all like to see it move faster, but it is moving. And it's picking up speed too. And so that's exciting. Harry?
I agree with everything Michael says, but there's only a few of us that have the courage to speak out. We have to encourage others to start speaking out. And that's one of my goals. That's why I try to encourage everybody I come across to speak out, because the more we can't depend on the few people that speak out now, the voices, because we are not the voices. The voices of dementia hasn't been heard yet. We have to encourage those voices to speak out.
There's a lot more of us speaking out than you realize. I mean, you may not see them here or in our circles, but I can tell you, I talk to people all the time, and they're out there speaking. They may not be as visible as we are, but I can assure you there's a lot of them out there talking.
Hopefully we'll just be able to keep raising everybody's profile. Mary, you had a comment?
I do a lot of conferences helping out with the Alzheimer's Association. So what I do is I help them set up, and I'll help sign people in for the conference. And then they'll be shocked when I go up to talk, and they're like, I thought you worked for the Alzheimer's Association. I didn't know that you have Alzheimer's. They're thinking of the end stage.
Yep.
So it's frightening to see.
I call that the puppy dog in the window effect. Because once they see you, they say, oh my God, look, she can talk. Oh, she has Alzheimer's. Isn't that cute?
I want to thank every one of you for your time today. As usual, I always learn something from these, and I look forward to others hearing your voice and your ideas and power behind them. So thank you guys so much. Talk soon.